With each generation, a new Catwoman emerges from the shadows. For director Matt Reeves, the Batman presented the perfect opportunity to reimagine the complex character of Selina Kyle.
The villains are often, some of the most, if not the most exciting part of the movies. I mean, the Rogues Gallery is incredible. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to see a Batman that was not an origin tale, but was sort of in his early days. But that meant that a lot of the characters who are the Rogues Gallery characters are in their origins in a way. And so we have a Selina Kyle who's not yet Catwoman.
Selina can take care of herself. She's incredibly tough. She really wants to fight for those who don't have someone else to fight for them. And I think that is where Batman and she really connect.
What's most interesting about Selina Kyle is that she represents the savior for the ill-treated, the forgotten, the people that have not had anybody looking after them. She's also very complicated. You don't quite know exactly where her loyalty or her allegiance lie.
Welcome back, everyone. This is going to be my new Batman movie video. Matt Reeves, DC, just released this new clip about the Batman movie, talking about the Rogues Gallery of villains, talking about Batman, talking about Catwoman. There's a whole bunch of really big stuff coming up for the movie, so be sure to subscribe to get everything. Of course, I'll be doing videos for it all year as they continue to release new trailers. But if you're not sure what's going on with this is actually part of a larger, big documentary about the Catwoman character in general, but they used it to talk about a lot of what's going on in the new Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson Batman movies. I believe you can watch a version of this, like the larger Catwoman documentary, if you have any of the first 4 Batman movies, starting with Michael Keaton's Batman. I believe it's part of the bonus features, but this is a tiny portion taken from a much larger thing. But the really cool thing is you have Matt Reeves talking about his inspiration for doing the movie with the younger version of Batman earlier in his career, and by default, that also meant that the core Rogues Gallery of villains, all the big characters, had to be at the same point in their evolution. So if it wasn't clear, this is meant to be Batman Year 2 during the events of the film. There is a Batman HBO spin-off series that he's doing with Gordon and some of the other bigger Batman movie characters that'll be premiering sometime next year, I believe. But that's actually meant to be Batman Year 1. It's just when people think about Batman early in his career, usually the first thing they go to is Frank Miller's Batman Year 1 because that was such a good story. But as Matt Reeves says, he didn't want to do another origin story because Christopher Nolan just did Batman Begins. So thus, that's why he chose to do it as Batman Year 2. So he's been Batman for a little while. That's why you see the version of his costume still kind of looks like a prototype of what will eventually evolve into something that looks closer to, say, like Ben Affleck's Batman costume, with a much older version of Batman. That also means he doesn't have the classic Batcave yet, like this is meant to be a different version, and all the other classic Rogues Gallery of villains have not fully become their characters from the comics yet. Like, nobody's wearing a fully comic book accurate costume, but it does look like some of them are inspired by classic versions of the costumes. The timeline in the comics is a little bit different for the way Batman evolves with the cape and cowl and the way his Rogues Gallery of villains evolves and how he encounters them across the years. But the way Matt Reeves and the other people behind the movie talk about Batman in this film, most of the regular citizens of Gotham City have heard about a guy dressed up as a bat running around the past year, beating up criminals at night, because it has been a year. We're in Batman Year 2. But most of the people, like the average people in Gotham, don't totally buy that it's a real thing. Like, they just think that it's all lies in the press. And the rest of the people in the city that do believe in him aren't really sure what to make of him, whether he's friend or foe or just an agent of chaos, to make a Christopher Nolan Joker reference. I will talk about the Joker later in the video because he is supposed to exist within the world of this version of Batman, which is supposed to be Earth 2, by the way. Matt Reeves clarified last year at DC Fandome that his Batman movies will take place in an alternate universe from the main Justice League movies to explain how this version of Batman can exist in present day, but also be way younger. They'll be using the concept of the multiverse in the Flash movie to sort of sew everything together with all the disparate parts that don't completely make sense on their own. But a version of the Joker is meant to exist in the world of Matt Reeves' Batman. Apparently, though, he's not really going to be featured in a big way during this first new Batman movie. I think just because there's been so much Joker lately between Heath Ledger's Joker, which obviously was amazing in The Dark Knight, Jared Leto's Joker in The Suicide Squad, more recently in the Justice League Snyder Cut, and then Joaquin Phoenix's Joker movie. There was even a Hollywood Reporter article where they claimed that inside Warner Brothers, there's still talks about doing a sequel to Joaquin Phoenix's Joker movie. But the way Todd Phillips was talking about it more recently, he said that if that was going to happen, it was going to be a good long while. So I would say if they do a sequel to that film, we won't see it for like another 3 or 4 years, bare minimum. But all the classic Rogues Gallery of villains are meant to exist within the world of this new Matt Reeves Batman movie. And as he says, they're all just going through their early days too. But Matt Reeves goes so far as to say that during the events of this film, Selina Kyle has not become Catwoman yet, even though she's clearly wearing a very stepped-down prototype of a Catwoman suit, which I think is partially meant to be inspired by the classic Catwoman suit. I think what he means is that she's just doing Catwoman things in the film, but no one is calling her Catwoman, and she doesn't call herself, she doesn't think of herself as Catwoman. She's just running around stealing things, trying to help people on the streets. As Zoe Kravitz talks about the character, she says her version of Catwoman is trying to fight for people who don't have anyone. I guess that goes hand in hand with the idea that most people in the city, at least at this point in the timeline, Batman Year 2, don't believe that either Batman exists, or if they do believe he exists, don't think that he's fighting for them. I think that's what's meant to happen by the end of this film, like the whole idea that Batman isn't sure how he's connected to this larger mystery that the Riddler is trying to throw at him. Like the Riddler is trying to call out Batman, trying to force him to get rid of all this corruption in the city. Whereas at the beginning of the film, he comes off as more of a villain, killing the mayor here. I'll talk about him in a second too, because the whole idea is that the Riddler is going through his origin story and starts out as more of an anti-hero character, at least with a good idea, that's just really poor in its execution, like wanting to get rid of a corrupt mayor, corruption in the city, but also going around killing people to do it. So as they talk about the Catwoman character and obviously the Riddler character he's presented, the funny thing is they are trying to do good things, but they don't have any real interest in being good people. It's just that they hate the really, really rotten people in the city and they want to get rid of them. But through their own actions, eventually some of them wind up becoming really big, powerful villains in the city, like the classic versions of the comic book characters. The new footage of her inside the cemetery seems like it's from the same scenes we saw them filming earlier this year with both Batman and Catwoman driving into the cemetery on their motorcycles. And this scene of her inside the tomb with the cat, I think is just implied by her voiceover that she's just thinking about all these dead people and the people on the street that she's trying to help. I did try to find Easter eggs in these names, and none of them are big DC Comics characters, so I don't think they're meant to be super significant other than just to make her think about what she's doing and why she's doing it. The cemetery itself seems fairly significant during the film, like you see the separate footage of Batman driving at night into the cemetery, and what seems like a separate scene also entering his current version of the Batcave. So even though the Batcave seems like it's an abandoned subway station or train station hall, it might be near the cemetery, like the entrance might be near the cemetery. And separately, Batman tends to visit the cemetery on a pretty regular basis to visit his parents' graves. So it just seems like the cemetery itself will be a big location during the film. Very dark, very gothic, very in the tone of a Batman movie. I think the idea in the clip when they talk about Catwoman as an anti-hero, like you're not meant to know where her loyalty lies, obviously that's just in keeping with the tone of her character in the comics. In the context of the movie, I think that's her just not completely trusting Batman when they cross paths, and not wanting to completely throw in with characters like the Penguin or the other criminals in the city like Falcone. A lot of the movie, as you can see from the trailer footage, is inspired by Batman the Long Halloween story. But in this scene here, you see Batman catch her in the act of trying to steal from what seems like a rich person's house. But in the comic book version of the story, Bruce Wayne is actually dating Selina Kyle at the very beginning, but neither one of them knows each other's secret identity because they're still relatively early in their careers. They attend a party that's being thrown by Carmine Falcone, and at the party, separately Carmine tries to compel Bruce Wayne to launder his billions of dollars through mob-controlled banks. He obviously turns them down, but they also find out that their friend Harvey Dent is there being beaten up by Falcone's men because he's trying to prosecute Falcone. They save him, but then later Batman comes back in full costume to actually investigate Falcone's penthouse so that they can find more evidence to actually convict him, and catches Catwoman in the act of stealing from his safe. So I think the idea is that the mayor was corrupt and the Riddler was trying to out him, but there's also a lot of police corruption because that's a big theme in Batman stories, and the Riddler wants to do something about it. He's just going about it in a very Batman villain kind of way. So that's what I say when I mean a lot of the Batman villains in Matt Reeves' Rogues Gallery are meant to start out more as anti-heroes. Like he's trying to show clear motivation on their part. Like they start out as normal people who are driven to extremes and wind up becoming villains through their own actions. And just the way they present Catwoman, at least in this clip and talk about her, I think the idea in the movie is that she's really only stealing things Robin Hood style. Like she's only stealing from really bad rich people. Her whole connection to Carmine Falcone, like you see them at the mayor's funeral here together, I believe she believes that he's really her father, but eventually in the comics, it's found out that her father wound up being somebody totally different. It's not super clear what that means for Colin Farrell's version of the Penguin and his origin story, because he's not meant to be the main villain of this film in the way that most of the story focuses on Batman and the Riddler's story. The way they're presenting him in the footage, he seems more like a mid-level criminal with a small group around him, operating similar to what you'd see from some of the mob characters, or maybe this earlier version of the character does have ties to the mob at this point in history. As for the Joker, the way they've talked about him so far, or at least the rumors, is that it's going to be more of a Batman Begins situation. Like, they'll tease him, there'll be some references to him in the first movie, but he won't be featured in a big way. The same way in Batman Begins, no one ever said the name, the Joker. Gordon just whips out the playing card and says, this might be a thing, and Batman says, oh, check it out. And that just let you know that the Joker was coming. But let me know in the comments who you'd want to be that new version of the Joker within this universe once they work up to him. Leave all your big DC video requests in the comments below. There's a bunch of Loki episodes that I'll be doing videos for. They'll be starting really soon, so make sure you have alerts enabled so you don't miss anything. Everyone click here for that brand new big Marvel Phase 4 trailer video and the Eternals trailer, and click here for my full breakdown of the entire plot of the Justice League Snyder Cut 2 and Justice League 3 movies that Zack Snyder had planned out. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys tonight.